How good would Michael Jordan be in today's NBA? This is one of the most debated questions in basketball circles. Michael Jordan is widely considered the GOAT, but opinions on that vary, with some arguing that the 90s had tougher players, while others claim that era was filled with firemen and plumbers. Since LeBron James and Jordan played in different eras, the only way to compare them would be if Jordan stepped into a time machine and entered the 2025 NBA season. If MJ played today, he'd still be one of the league's best players, though his dominance would look slightly different. The idea that he would waltz in and average 50 points per game is an exaggeration, but he still would remain an elite scorer and a force to be reckoned with. Jordan played in an era of hand-checking, limited spacing, and big men clogging the paint, yet he still averaged over 30 points per game in multiple seasons, including an astonishing 37 points per game in the 1986-87 season. The physicality of the 90s forced him to take difficult shots and fight through defenses in ways that today's stars don't have to. That said, people tend to overlook how the 90s also had rules that made scoring easier in some ways. You see, back then, the NBA had illegal defense rules, which prevented teams from playing a true zone. Defenders couldn't freely roam or sag off their man unless they were actively double-teaming, meaning elite scorers like Jordan often got more one-on-one opportunities. Imagine if someone like Kyrie played in an era where defenses couldn't sag off of him. He would get isolation plays nearly every possession, making him even harder to guard. That just puts into perspective how much that rule benefited Jordan when it came to scoring. Of course, when the NBA legalized zone defense in the 2001-2 season, it helped defense become much more sophisticated, forcing scorers to navigate more complex defensive schemes. As a result, if Jordan played today, teams could run zones against him in ways that they couldn't during his career, and forcing him to jack up threes would be a great strategy. And that's if you're assuming that Jordan wouldn't just become a sniper just because he played in a three-point shooting era, and that's what I'm assuming, and that's what I personally believe. While it's possible he would have adapted, you can't just assume he'd develop elite range. If adding a jump shot were that easy, players like Ben Simmons and Shaq would have done it. Jordan was never a great three-point shooter. His career 32.7% from deep suggests he could hit them, but he wasn't elite at it. Expecting him to suddenly have Steph Curry-like range just because of today's style of play is unrealistic. Instead, he would likely thrive as a dominant mid-range scorer, similar to Kawhi Leonard, but with superior athleticism and finishing ability. And let's be clear, just because Jordan wouldn't be a lethal three-point shooter doesn't mean he wouldn't dominate. As long as he was at least an average shooter from deep, he'd be fine. His stats would likely be similar to what they were in his prime, but he wouldn't be better, because that would mean adding skills he didn't originally have. It's like if we are debating how LeBron would play in the 2034 NBA 9 years from now, where every player is a 7'4" floor spacer, and I argued that LeBron would adjust by becoming a 7-foot sharpshooter. But that's ridiculous. That wouldn't be LeBron anymore. That'd be some made-up version of him. The same logic applies to MJ in three-point shooting. Obviously, if you give Jordan Steph Curry's jump shot, he'd be unstoppable today, but that's just ignoring that the all-time greats had their own weaknesses. Now don't get it twisted. I take a middle ground stance on this debate on how good MJ would be if he played today. I can also admit that some people go too far in the other direction, claiming Jordan would be just another player or even a role player in today's game. That's completely false. He'd still be one of the best players in the league and a perennial all-defensive first-team selection. His two-way dominance would be a cheat code, especially in today's league where the best offensive stars like Luka Doncic and Jokic don't bring elite defense to the table. Another ridiculous take I've heard is that Jordan wouldn't be able to compete athletically. That's absurd. He had a 40+ inch vertical, and just because he played in the 90s doesn't mean he wasn't an elite athlete. Either you can jump or you can't, and MJ could jump. Would his athleticism stand out as much today? Maybe not, since there are more high-flying athletes now, but he'd still be dunking on people regularly. One of the more common comparisons is that Jordan would just be a more athletic, bald DeMar DeRozan, and that just sells him way short. DeRozan is a great mid-range scorer, but he lacks Jordan's defensive intensity, playmaking, and finishing ability. A better comparison would be a more evolved version of Kawhi Leonard, elite in the mid-range, an exceptional defender, and a relentless competitor. Statistically, Jordan would likely put up similar numbers to his prime, around 30 to 35 points per game, but not necessarily more. The modern game would offer him better spacing, but also more defensive schemes designed to slow him down. However, while Jordan would still dominate individually, his team success wouldn't be as overwhelming as it was in the 90s. The NBA today has far more parity. There isn't a single team steamrolling through the league like the Bulls did. We've seen a different champion in each of the past 6 seasons, and that trend might continue. Winning 6 championships, especially doing a three-peat, in today's NBA would be much harder. Another interesting thought, Jordan probably wouldn't be a lifelong Bulls legend or stay with one team. People criticize LeBron for not being loyal, but in today's player-driven era, Jordan probably wouldn't play for just one team and would likely play for 3 or 4 different teams, not just the Bulls and Wizards like he did in the 90s. In conclusion, if Jordan played in 2025, he'd still be Jordan, an elite mid-range scorer, a fierce competitor, and one of the best players in the league. He wouldn't be an unstoppable 50 points per game machine though, but he also wouldn't just be another guy. His individual dominance would remain, but his team success might not reach the same heights due to the league's increased parity. He wouldn't just be a bald DeMar DeRozan, he'd be a defined, hyper-competitive Kawhi Leonard with an unmatched drive to win. But what do you think? Would Jordan be better than LeBron if he played in today's NBA? Tell me in the comment section below. Until next time, peace.